What's up, everybody? Couch Milfs here, coming at you with a brand new Valorant video. And in this video, we gotta break down the 7 mistakes that even high-ranked players make. And if they make these mistakes, then you can bet that you're making these mistakes as well. So if you want to become the best that you can be, climb the ranked ladder, and grow 3 inches in the process, make sure you smash that like and subscribe and watch it to the end. But go to the GameLeap website in the links down below for in-depth advanced guides, VOD reviews, tips and tricks, dating advice, and much more. Go check it out in the description right now. But without further ado, let's jump into the video. Now moving on to the first big mistake, and this is a gigantic mistake that players often really throw rounds altogether when they fail to utilize their numbers advantage. You see, when you have a numbers advantage, not only does the enemy have a lot less potential killing power because they have less guns available to them, but there are less abilities on the enemy team, which means there's less things you have to worry about. It's really important for you to identify what types of things you have to worry about when you have that numbers advantage, and what types of things do you have to not play around anymore. For instance, if the enemy has no more flash characters, you do not have to play around any type of flashes. In the same vein, quickly identifying that the enemy does have a certain type of ultimate, let's say the enemy Omen has his ult, you could imagine that if they can somehow get a pick incredibly quickly, he could teleport to the other side and get a plant down, putting you in a further disadvantage, and maybe even clutching up if, let's say it's in a 1v4, he gets 1 or 2 kills, teleports, and then he uses the spike down and the time ticking down to win that 1v2. These are all things that you need to be actively thinking about, so you can really not only use the fact that you have more numbers, but that you have a lot more abilities than they do, and there's some types of abilities that are going to be completely cut off from them using it all because those characters are dead. On top of that, there is a really important concept about controlling the map where you spread out, especially on defense. You're spreading out, you're making sure that enemies are not slipping through the cracks, they're not getting some crazy lurks off and things like that, and you want to make sure that all information is perfectly known. Now, while this is very important when you're playing default at the very beginning without any team or side losing any numbers, if you have a giant amount of advantage, like it's 4-1, having information is not the most important thing that you could have anymore, because you got to think about it. If the enemy just gets to go wherever they want without you knowing and plant, now they have to somehow play a post-plant situation where you could put the pressure on them by tapping the spike. They have to reveal themselves up against all 3 of you, and that's just impossible for them to win. So instead of playing really spread out, trying to gather that information and giving the enemy a chance to get some free kills in true 1v1s, set yourself up in a neutral area, either committing to like a midsection or committing to a point altogether where you are all guarding each other's angles and refrags so that the enemy can't possibly take a 1v1, and then you go and play that retake together if they do indeed plant the spike. This is a very important thing that you can do to make it so the enemy team never wins in a numbers disadvantage. But let's talk about the second big mistake that players are making a lot, even high-ranked players, is they are not treading the line between cautious and confidence. Now, let me explain this concept because it's really important. So one thing that you can do is you can adapt your play on the fly, and the best way to get the maximum amount of impact and carry potential without actually throwing the game is you gotta play on that line where you respect an enemy just enough, or the enemy team just enough not to feed, but you never respect them too much to where you're scared to go for plays. Now, a lot of times building up confidence can be very difficult, but it's important not to be scared of your enemy. Just being confident alone and going in with confidence is worth value automatically, because you never give yourself a chance to succeed, and you give up far too much space if you're just backing up, running away from a fight all the time. But there's also a point where this gets too far, where you are just all confidence and no respect, and enemies just get to set up unfair engagements onto you again and again because you become predictable, or you're peeking into 2 people at the same time, or peeking into utility, or fighting an angle that you're disadvantaged in. The list goes on and on, where you do need to give enemies a certain amount of respect, but you also need to be confident at the right times, and be aware when your confidence gets shattered, when maybe you messed up or missed a play or whatever, and identify that, hey, I messed up a play, the enemy's not crazy better than me, and I am not a terrible player, I just messed up one play, let's mentally reset and let's go again. Now moving on to the third big mistake that a lot of players make, and it's the lack of challenging for map control. And a lot of people don't really understand what this concept is, but essentially it is pushing up and holding angles together or parts of the map together, whether you're on attack or defense, and essentially isolating the areas on the map where an enemy can possibly be. For example, let's say you as a team, you're holding on split, right? And you have 2 players on B, and one person looks up, sees no one on the enemy team pushed up on B. They're not even playing in B default. So you have a player lurk up, they check all the way to their spawn, there's no one there, they push up, they control mid, and now, because you had teammates that cleared out through B default and there's no one there, and now they're in mid, the enemy couldn't possibly be anywhere but A, and now you successfully have isolated the areas on the map that enemies could be, and you put people in place to cut off any sort of rotation where you can make a play on the enemy. This makes it so the enemy has so much less opportunity for rotation-based plays. Your players on the point have to be less afraid of any flanks or anything like that, and you can essentially squeeze out the enemy's possible position, set up a play on them, and execute very easily, or set up some players to cut them off rotation. Whatever you're trying to do, taking that map control from enemies is very, very powerful. You can do the same thing on attack, where let's say a lot of your team are pushing bind B, right? They're pushing hookah, they're challenging, and a lot of the enemy team rotate. Well, you as a player, you go lurk up, you lurk up through U-Haul, you clear, 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 and now you just hold a position in the enemy team's heaven, or you just hold a position in the little link between the CT and between the point. You're just holding that space. Now, your teammates are going to go through the telly, go plan on site, and what is the enemy team going to do? They're all going to go rushing. They're going to go rushing to rotate back through their CT, but you're there. You control that area, you control that space, and you're already there way before any enemy would expect you, so you can cut them off, get the jump on them, and usually that's going to turn into 2 or 3 kills, and it's just going to be a 1-team fight from there. Now moving on to the 4th big mistake that even high-ranked players make, and it's not clearing out some space before risky plays. Now, this typically happens when you're doing something like defusing a spike, right? You need to defuse a spike, you have no idea where the enemy is. You're coming onto a point, and there's like 3 possible places where an enemy could be. Well, a lot of times, it's worth you going and clearing one of them or 2 of them, as many as you could realistically clear and still have enough time remaining to get the defuse off and fight. And the more angles that you can clear, especially angles that are behind you, so that at the very least you're looking in the general direction of where an enemy would come out and swing you, because you don't want to have to tap that spike and just gamble that they're going to peek out the angles that you're looking at. And while I see a lot of people just wanting to do it based on reaction time, like they hear it or they're gonna flick to it or whatever, you want to make it as easy as possible on yourself. And to do that, you have to clear out some angles so that you can isolate where the enemy could possibly be, and you can set up really nice crosshair placement after you do a fake spike defuse, so that you can just shut them down as they swing the corner. You have your crosshair placement right there, you get that headshot, and then you defuse the spike just like that. Now moving on to the 6th big mistake that even high-ranked players make, and this is leaving or disengaging areas unsafely. And what I mean by this is there's a lot of scenarios where you're pushing a point, or you want to push a point, the enemy uses a slow, the enemy uses a molly, they use smokes, whatever they use, and you decide, hey, I'm not gonna full commit to the point, I'm gonna wait, and then you might decide as a team, hey, we're gonna rotate off. Well, here's the thing that you have to do every single time. You have to make sure that you still have your crosshair placement, you're still prepared for enemies to come out and swing you until you're completely out of the LOS of where they could possibly be, because what's gonna happen is you and your teammates are gonna start disengaging, you might make some noise, and if an enemy has pushed up and took aggressive space to make a play, the second he hears movement, he's gonna swing on that angle, and if you're running away but you are not ready to fight in that moment, he's gonna get a pick on you. And this is why a lot of times when teams will disengage, they'll lose like 1, 2, or 3 people, and then the fight is already lost because you gave up the proper fundamentals as you disengaged, assuming that you were safe, and you can't do that. You got to make sure that you're very, very safe until you push into areas that are in space that you have already cleared, and the LOS of the areas you're in is in space that you've already cleared. That is the only time that you are going to be safe to like whip out your knife and run away and not look at those angles anymore, because an enemy could always just book it down, get that LOS on you, and get a kill on you when you're not ready to fight. Now moving on to the 7th big mistake that even high-ranked players make, and this is investing ultimates in lost rounds. You see, here's the important thing about Valorant in general, when it comes to buying anything or using anything. You gotta think about using ultimates and using abilities and buying a gun as investments. And it's very important that you get a substantial return on the investments that you do make. And when you are doing that investment, you want to make sure that there's a high conversion rate between what you're doing and the results, which is the 1 round. Let's give you an example first off. Let's say you're going to buy an op without an armor. If you want to buy an op, right, you know that if you don't win that round, the enemy's going to get an op. You're basically making it so you cannot miss your shot because you have no armor, no abilities. You're doing a Hail Mary op play, and the investment there is really high and the risk is high. But the reward is, if you can hit your shots consistently, you might be able to snowball that into a multiple round wins, and you can make up the investment later, right? You win a couple of rounds off the back of that op, and you made up your investment. Well, it's the same thing for abilities, and to a much larger sense, it's the same thing for ultimates. And if you're using your ultimate when you're like 1v4 and you're just throwing it out there, that is not an investment worth taking. It is far better for you to try to use your ultimates to convert or turn the tides of a battle where it's really close. Let's say it's 2v3 and you can use your ultimates to make up that difference in numbers and even overcome that difference to win the round rather than doing it in like a 1v5. Do yourself a favor and always get a good return on your investments. And at the very least, don't set yourself up for failure by investing in already lost team fights by using all your ultimates or things like that. Now moving on to the last big mistake that even high-ranked players make, and it's losing hope on a few rounds. This happens to pretty much everyone, but even high-ranked players are not immune to this, and this is a really big problem and it has to do with mentality. The first thing that you need to understand is that comebacks are easy. Getting that comeback is so easy. If you can go down 0-6, then you can win 6 in a row. And if you just watch a streamer for a day, you'll just see how many games they were down by a ton and then out of nowhere, they come back. And as long as you make sure that you don't get tilted, you keep your mentality in order. And just remember, winning a game, that might be great. That might be just, you know, a MILF, right? But getting a comeback when you were 0-10, there ain't much better than that. But go to the Game Leaf website in the links down below for in-depth advanced guides, VOD reviews, divorce tips and tricks, and much more. Do yourself a favor, go check it out in the links down below. But thank you so much for coming by. That's all I got for you today. I'm Coach Mills, and until next time,